Was für ein Idiot! Nein, nein, das ist es nicht. Hi, maybe you know me. I used to work as a clerk in a Swiss patent office. The job was pretty easy, so I had plenty of time to fool around with my own ideas. Anyway, in 1905 I came up with this crazy theory that my friend Max later called relativity. As part of relativity, I claimed that nothing can go faster than light in vacuum, which we can write as C equals 299,792,458 meters per second. Ah, who can remember all those cockamamie numbers? Of course, all it would take is one genuine observation of a particle traveling faster than light to prove me wrong, but so far that hasn't happened. We do have a name for such particles, if they do exist, namely tachyons. So, if you ever should come across one, at least you'll know what to call it. Of course, there are always people trying to prove me wrong. The most recent case being in 2011, when a group at a lab in Geneva known as CERN announced to the world that they found some neutrinos traveling a smidgen faster than light. Neutrinos are the most elusive of all subatomic particles. In fact, right now there are around 1 trillion of them passing through your body each second, and I'll bet you don't feel a thing. If you do start feeling them, you probably are in need of some serious help. In fact, neutrinos are so hard to detect that they weren't observed until 26 years after they were first suggested by Wolfgang Pauli. The neutrinos measured by the CERN group seem to be traveling just 0.0000237% faster than light. That's like winning a 26-mile marathon with a photon or particle of light by less than half an inch. Still, despite the tiny excess speed, the result got the physics community really excited. Do you know how to tell when physicists get really excited? What? You think I am a dirty old man? You know they're excited when they drop everything and run right out and repeat the experiment to see if they get the same answer. Wouldn't you know, when they did that, they found a loose cable, so their earlier result was bogus. It disappeared. What? You thought doing experimental physics is easy? Still, maybe it's not such a great idea to announce revolutionary discoveries before you make absolutely certain there is no possibility of error, and certainly do not do it at press conferences. Anyway, as of now, light still holds the ultimate speed record. Given all the false claims of tachyons over the years, and the absurd properties they might have if they really existed, such as their ability to send messages back in time, possibly to your earlier self, can you imagine such a thing? So why do some physicists continue to say that tachyons really do exist? Are they on to something? Or maybe they're just on something. Let's start with relativity, where I didn't quite say that nothing can go faster than light. What I really said is that light in vacuum has a special speed, c, and you couldn't increase the speed of an object to that value. A feat which would require an infinite amount of energy. That is because relativity says a particle's mass, which seems to be constant at low speeds, is actually not a constant at all, but increases without limit as a particle's speed approaches c. So by E equals mc squared, its energy also becomes infinite at speed c. Still, physicists hate accepting anything just because some famous person like me, says that's just the way it is, and they are always looking for ways things might be otherwise. In 1962, 3 of them suggested a way around the infinite energy difficulty. These 3 guys said maybe tachyons could be created from energy in subatomic collisions and have faster than light speed from the very moment of their creation. That way, there's no need to add an infinite energy to them to have them get past the light speed barrier. In fact, believe it or not, relativity says tachyons actually would slow down as they gain energy, and it would take an infinite amount of energy to make them travel slower than c. This makes the speed of light a two-way barrier to particles on either side of it. Under this scheme, all the subatomic particles making up our universe can be neatly divided into 3 classes. 1. Ordinary particles like electrons and protons, known as tachyons, that always travel at sublight speed. Number 2. Tachyons that always have faster than light speed. And finally, 3. Particles like photons, known as luxons, that always travel exactly at the speed of light. The interesting thing here is that there is no way that particles in one of the 3 classes can move into another class. Just like the 3 classes on the airlines, you could say. Some people tell me I shouldn't tell God what to do, but I just don't think he would waste a great opportunity by leaving one of the 3 possible classes of particles completely empty in his creation. Or, as my friend Murray used to say, everything in physics that is not forbidden is compulsory. Anyway, like I said before, whether or not tachyons really do exist is strictly an empirical question. In order to explore the properties of subatomic particles, my experimental friends have developed gigantic contraptions known as accelerators, like the one at CERN, that they use to create collisions between particles at very high energies. You see, E equals mc squared really tells us that mass and energy are interchangeable, and new matter can be created by concentrating enough energy in one place in these particle collisions. Before we consider the ways a tachyon might reveal itself in an experiment, we need to consider some of the properties that faster-than-light particles would have according to relativity. Take their mass, for example, which relativity says is an imaginary number. You may recall that an imaginary number is defined as the square root of a negative number, which means that the square of a tachyon's mass would be negative. Oy vey! How could such nonsense be true? If you think of mass as what a scale reads, then it is very hard to see what an imaginary mass means. But physicists never measure particle masses using scales. Instead, we find their mass indirectly while they are moving by measuring both their energy E and their momentum P, which is defined as the product of their mass and velocity. In fact, according to relativity, the square of a particle's mass happens to equal the difference between the squares of its energy and momentum. Let's take an example and you'll see what I mean. Suppose you measured a particle's energy E and momentum P and always found that the energy was less than the momentum. What would you conclude? Exactly. The square of its mass would be negative, so the object would have to be a tachyon. This method of finding mass has in fact been used to see if the neutrinos emitted during the decay of a particle known as a pion are in fact tachyons. You probably don't know what a pion is, but don't worry about it. It is just one of the many unstable subatomic particles that can be produced in high-energy collisions, and it decays into a so-called muon and a neutrino. Let's see how pion decay can tell us about the mass of the neutrino. No observation is actually made of the neutrino, labeled nu, because it leaves no trace in a detector. Still, we can find both its energy and momentum by recording the recoiling muon. We then use E and P to find the square of the neutrino mass. What do physicists find when they make these measurements? Unfortunately, the experimental uncertainty in mass squared is not small enough to give a definite conclusion. So until this experiment can be done more precisely, we need to look elsewhere to find evidence that neutrinos actually are tachyons. You might be wondering why all this focus on neutrinos. Why not check whether the electron is a tachyon? Well, it just so happens that neutrinos are the only possibility, because they are the lightest of all known particles by far. In other words, given the size of the experimental uncertainties, their mass squared is so close to zero that so far we cannot tell whether it is a positive or negative. It's just like having a really incompetent tax preparer tell you that you owe the government approximately $200 in taxes, plus or minus $300. You wouldn't know in this case whether to write a check or expect a refund. In 1985, 3 physicists came up with a really weird way of testing whether neutrinos are tachyons. Normally, a particle can decay into other particles only if its mass exceeds the sum of the masses of the things into which it decays, with the energy of the emitted particles coming from the conversion of some of the initial mass into energy, just like in the case of pion decay. But things change if one of the emitted particles is a tachyon. Let's say our initial particle is a proton, and let's imagine that it could spontaneously decay into a neutron, a positive electron, known as a positron, and a neutrino, shown by the Greek letter nu. When the proton is at rest, this process cannot possibly occur because the neutron is more massive than the proton, so energy could not be conserved. But relativity shows that the process amazingly can occur if neutrinos are tachyons, provided we see the initial proton zipping past us at a sufficiently very high speed or energy. In that case, the emitted neutrino behaves as though it has negative energy, or it is moving backwards in time. We, of course, consider ourselves as going forward in time. So to us, the backward time-traveling neutrino appears to be absorbed from the surrounding space rather than emitted by the proton. Actually, in this case, it becomes a so-called antineutrino. But don't worry about that. Where did these crazy Michiganers come up with such ideas? In 1999, another physicist used this method to look for backward time-traveling neutrinos. Essentially, he examined the numbers of very high-energy cosmic ray protons that bombard the Earth from space, and he found that they seemed to be missing in greater and greater numbers above some energy we'll call E0. This observation suggested to him that the protons were decaying when their energy exceeded E0, and therefore that neutrinos are indeed tachyons. In fact, very recently this fellow found still more evidence from some 1987 data from an exploding supernova in a neighboring galaxy. His result, if correct, would not conflict at all with the negative result from the CERN experiment, because the neutrinos would have a mass squared so close to zero that no measurement of their speed would show a departure from C. Could he actually be right? Like I've said, it is strictly an empirical question, and fortunately there are a number of ways to check the results, so time will tell. By the way, did I ever mention that I'm very fond of crazy ideas myself? Because even though maybe 99% of them are wrong, it is always important to keep one's eye out for the ones that just might be true.